Hello, and welcome to the Improvement Nerds podcast, where we host conversations about the things that nerd us out. The idea behind the Improvement Nerds podcast is to invite guests onto our show and give them a platform to talk about the things that make them nerdy. And as they share their ideas, we want to explore the important question of how does that idea intersect with improvement? We're curious about multiple types of improvement of self, improvements made by teams, improvements made by organizations and communities of people. We even want to know improvement that's occurring at a larger scale, possibly with a societal impact. During each episode, we, along with our guests, will explore the topics that person's passionate about. The things that, when they're doing them, make time pass without any effort. The things that seem more like play than they do work. The things that are possibly that person's true calling. As we explore the topics that make us and that guest nerdy, we'll explore the why behind that passion and understand the purpose that idea is bringing to that person's life. We'll allow that person to teach us a little bit and share with us more information about that topic so that we can explore the idea for ourselves. Then, we'll look at how that passion intersects with improvement. In other words, we want to know how that idea makes us better people, better friends, better employees, better leaders, better insert whatever role might fit. We're excited to have you join us on this journey as we and our guests nerd out. Hello, Improvement Nerds, and welcome to episode 6. I'm excited to be sharing this episode with you. I'm talking to a great friend, Amanda Cross. Our conversation starts and begins focusing in on what it was like to work in technical writing, but as we continue our conversation, it quickly morphs from technical writing to more of becoming a learning organization. It was a lot of fun to create this episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Hey everyone, this is Tom, back with another episode of the Improvement Nerds. I've got a special guest with me today. It's someone I've known for quite a while. I don't want to do the math, but our MBA years are 10 years behind us now. So, meeting you during that point in time was just serendipitous. I think going through the program, you needed a great team of people to get through your MBA years.
Yep.
And we were heavily relying on each other for those 3 years, and we made it so much fun. Like outside of class, we would get together, we would hang out, we got to know each other's families and stuff. So
That's true.
Just excited to have you today. I want to introduce you quick, at least with my notes, and then I want you to kind of follow up on the things I've missed.
All right.
So my guest today, she has got a technical writing background. She has worked extensively with organizations on developing a technical communication strategy. And for me, I've asked her to explain that to me, and here's how I've tried to understand it is it's the translation guide for the end users to understand the technology that has been created. So she, in some ways, is that translation point between the technical team that's creating the product or services and the end user. So it's a two-way communication street. So she's got an extensive background in doing that for organizations. Outside of that, because she has so much free time, she has supported the creation of a handful of books as a ghostwriter. And from the people who have worked with her, she's become highly recommended. Most of her work actually comes word of mouth because the excellent service that she gets. So she has always delivered amazing results, and as a result of that, she's in high demand. But I think as you guys listen to her story and learn what her background is, that it may be someone that you want to follow up with. And as such, the best way to reach her is to visit her website, which is www.crosswiseconsulting.com. So very excited to introduce you all to Amanda Cross.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excited to have you. So in that introduction, what did I miss? I know I didn't talk much about your previous podcasting experiences and your passion for baseball. So.
That's true. Yeah, back in the day, I used to run a Cincinnati Reds blog. That went from about 2005 to 2014. There was a lot of terrible years of baseball in there, and the finding the skills to enjoy a losing team was really eye-opening. Maybe that could be the topic of another one of your podcasts.
Yeah, how to suffer together.
How to find the joy in the losing.
Great. So as I shared in that introduction, you and I, we met through the
Right.
MBA program, and at that point, you were working with an organization downtown, pretty big. Although maybe if people aren't from our market, they may not know what that organization is. But it's morphed and grown, and it's created a lot of spinoffs, and it's actually been acquired a handful of times. And today, it actually exists as a whole new company. But tell us
That's
a
true.
little bit about where you were working when I first met you back in our MBA
Yeah,
years.
sure. Yeah, I was working at ExactTarget at the time, which, in the Indianapolis area, boy, it's unusual when you introduce yourself as being from ExactTarget and a person didn't know what that was. I remember being at a networking event one time, and I said, I'm the documentation manager at ExactTarget, and they said, "Oh, what's that?" I was like gobsmacked for a moment, like, I haven't gotten to tell anyone about this company in so long. Everyone already knows. But I started in at ExactTarget, which is an email marketing company for people who are outside the market and aren't aware of it. It started, I'm thinking, sometime in the early 2000s, and it was creating software that was used by email marketers to send out things like coupon codes and just the kinds of ads that you get from companies, not spam stuff, not Nigerian prince scams, but the kinds of authentic emails that you actually sign up from your favorite pet food store or your favorite restaurants to send you rewards club information and things like that.
So as we got close to the end of our MBA careers, some things started to change for you, and that was a result for the changes that were happening to ExactTarget. So in that transition, you stepped out on your own and you created Crosswise Consulting. But what was that catalytic event? What was going on with ExactTarget that
Trying to
gave
think
you
through
that
the timeline.
runway?
We finished our MBA, I think, in 2011. And I think I left in 2012, so it was pretty close.
Right on the heels.
Yeah, I started in at the company when it was about 250 employees, which is pretty small. It was in the multiple thousands by the time that I left. I'd always thought that I would go out and start my own company. It was something I'd always wanted to do. But earlier on in my career, I felt like I didn't know enough of my field to be able to really offer anything to a contracting situation or to a client. And so I went and I worked some, and then I'm like, I really know what I'm doing now, but who would I don't really know how to run a business, and so I ended up getting the MBA, and then I was like, okay, well, I've got the business knowledge, who would I go to for jobs, how do I find work in this arena? And then that was about the time that ExactTarget was being acquired by Salesforce. And so when Salesforce acquired ExactTarget, it created a large number of millionaires in the Indianapolis area, people I had been working with for 5 years, and they, a lot of people left, and they went and started their own companies. And once their software got to a place where they realized that they wanted to have some professional technical user assistance, they said, well, who do I know who can do that? Oh, I know, Amanda. And so they called me up, and I'd go to work for their company for a while, and we'd get some things in place. And then, sometimes they would grow to the point that they would want to bring on somebody full-time, or maybe they would decide to change software. The people in the contracting world, you kind of drift into and out of people's lives. But I'm happy to say that I've only had good experiences with my clients. I haven't had to take anyone to court. haven't had any arguments about anything. It's been a very, and gosh, it's been 8 years coming up next month. It'll be 8 years.
Yeah, and I think just growing up in this field and seeing all the changes and all the mergers and acquisitions that were occurring, that helped to develop a busy savviness. So you were very strong technically and had the credentials that could say, I know how to author, I know how to create documents that will facilitate good understanding of your products and services and help increase end user acceptance and adoption. So you had that side, and then as the organization grew a lot, you grew with it. So you eventually, if I remember correctly, you moved into leadership, and you had a team of people working for you. While that was like maybe within that first year of our MBA, you were on this tremendous growth curve. So I remember watching those things happen for you. And then suddenly after we had graduated, I saw an announcement that you were going out on your own. And I was like, well, and that's just her continued growth. Is she grew up and blossomed in this organization. She created very meaningful relationships, and she has a tribe of people that are going to support her as she goes out on her own.
Right.
And it sounds like, that family that you had created while you were exact target, those same people became your first clients, and that relationship just continued to occur.
Yeah, I would say that's true. There's a lot of things, boy, I feel like
we're going down memory lane, aren't we?
yeah, as I'm thinking about things I want to talk about, the ideas that you're bringing up, it's kind of taking me into a realm that I think we want to get into further down in this discussion. So, is this a good time for me to kind of introduce the nerdy topic?
Yes, let's dive into that. So I'll set it up.
Introduced.
Yes, you're officially introduced, and maybe in the podcast notes I'll have some translation of some of the things you've said.
Okay.
Because you do speak a different language, and that's what's beautiful about you is you have that ability to translate the technical world into everyday language. And even with that, there's some acronyms you'll probably use, and there's even stories you'll tell where thank you for that.
Well, definitely call me out on things like that, because that is actually supposed to be my job.
I need a red button like you used it. So you used an acronym, hit the buzzer. So, all right, let's get that question out on the table. So, Amanda Cross, what nerds you out?
Well, I think the topic that I want to nerd out about on today, I have many nerdy topics.
That's true for most nerds. Is they oftentimes have a hard time narrowing it into that one thing.
But the thing I want to talk about today is I'm calling it living content. And living content is, you could call it process thinking, or you could call it agile methodology, or you could call it Scrum, or you could call it a lot of different things. Those
are all very nerdy things.
They're very nerdy. They're all related to each other. And I think that by talking about the living content is kind of the application of the same idea to one little thing, and that's content. And when I talk about content, I'm talking about written words. Maybe that's going to be your website content. Maybe it is your knowledge-based content. Maybe it is related to user manuals. But most of my work has been done in the software arena. So I've worked for software companies really since I left college. When I first graduated with my undergraduate. So it's been 20 years now of working with software companies. And so when I'm talking about content, I'm specifically talking about written word about software that is used by software companies to either internally or externally to help their customers stay aware of what's going on.
And I think that's an amazing resource and should be seen as an asset for an organization. So I'm going to just follow up on this concept of the knowledge base. So I was in healthcare, and as we started to adopt technology and try to become more current with how we were administering our processes or performing HR or managing our supply chain, technology came into our environment, and the end user in some situations would have a hard time performing the functions of that tool. So the first thing they would do is to call the help desk. And I didn't realize that this is how all help desks kind of function, is on that intake they are asking discovery type questions that will lead them to a knowledge article, which is oftentimes written by someone like you, who helps then translate and guide the conversation between what's the problem the end user's having, and you, technical expert on the other side of the phone at the help desk, here's the questions you need to ask and the potential remedies that you can bring forward to help this person have a resolution. And most help desk wants to be able to resolve that issue in one touch. So first call resolution. So some of the work you've done, that content being created is a great asset, because if the technology is not working for that end user and they're calling in and they're trying to get resolution and they can't, now that operator is on hold or in a holding pattern, or they're waiting, and if your internal operator is delayed, your customer is getting delayed. So that these tools that you create, that's the value in them, is that it enables people to do their work when they're trying to perform their work through a technological interface.
Right. So what you've described is kind of the gold standard, right? It's what people are
That's
working
dream world.
towards. That's not. It's what everyone wants to do, but it isn't what everyone's doing. So let me take you back. It's like I said, I started in this field in 2000, so this is back in the day before digital was even really a thing everyone did. So one of my first jobs, the company actually, the technical communication team actually wrote books, actual user manuals, and they had an encyclopedia of knowledge. And I'm not kidding. It was I think 15 books worth of information about how their product worked. And here's how things used to go in these days. Your software team, your developers and their product managers the product managers would come up with a list of new features that they wanted. What do clients want? What do customers want to be able to do with our software? So they'd come up with that. They'd take their software developers in a room and they would design out what it's going to do, and the software developers would be tapping away, and they'd create software that did what the product wanted it to do, what product management wanted it to do. And then when it was done, they would send it through QA. And if the company was particularly efficient, at the same time they were giving it to QA to work on testing it, quality assurance to test it, make sure it was not breaking things and was doing things the way it was supposed to, they would also send it to documentation. Quite possibly, though, it would go all the way through QA before it went to documentation, because this was a very serial kind of process. Or this step, then this step, then this step, then this step. Then documentation they might get some meetings, they might get some demos with software developers. They could probably ask questions to the developers, though by that time the developer was probably working on something else, so they might not remember, that wasn't top of mind, they probably were annoyed by your questions. But mostly what they would do is they would get a copy of the software and they would figure it out, and they would just kind of figure out based on what they expected it to do. And a big part of being in technical communication is kind of intuiting what software does, and then being able to ask the dumb questions, and that's I'll come back to that. So being able to intuit what the software does and write it down in a way that people are going to be able to understand. And, it's very easy to do a software documentation where you look through at each screen of the software and say, this is on this menu, and these are the options that you'll find. And this is what this button is, and this is what this window does. But really what you want to be able to do is what a person's coming in and what do they want to accomplish? Yeah. Here's how to create a resume.
So specific use cases.
Yes, that's process-oriented documentation. So you can imagine with a situation like this where you're kind of just thrown over the wall. A piece of software is just thrown over the wall, and you catch it, and you just kind of sit there by yourself in the dark with a piece of software, and it's your naivete with it is part of the benefit, because the user is naive too. The user is going to be naive, and you need to be asking the same questions that they're going to be asking, and writing down those answers. But it makes for a documentation team that's very insular, and it's very territorial. And when you create books, the software to create books, especially then, even now though, there's a high learning curve. It's very difficult for people who aren't book writers to make sense of it. There's a lot of editing marks that you see. There's a lot of unintuitive kinds of behaviors with the software that you use to format books. And so there was a lot of territorialness. Don't touch the documentation. It's mine only. If you need something, tell me, and I will go in and do it. Made this kind of walled garden around the documentation.
So your team, in some ways, was siloed.
So very much siloed, and also very much disrespected. The documentation in software companies notoriously is, how do you feel about swears?
I think we could do a handful of them. Let's give you a quota. Otherwise,
a maximum.
Yeah, you can do 6.
The documentation team is completely shit on.
Yes. I've heard that it rolls downhill. That substance rolls downhill. In your world of technology, oftentimes the sales team, the product managers, and the producers, which are the people who code and write software, are those who may have higher levels of authority because they're oftentimes revenue producing. And I think this is probably still true today, because I know a handful of people who work within the technology industry that the support services on the backside of that technology oftentimes are underappreciated and underfunded. So that was true in your career, and I think in
yes.
some cases it's still true today that so much focus is on creation and not enough focus is on service and follow-up thereafter.
And Tom, think about how that makes you feel as the person at the bottom of that chain.
I cringe just a little bit.
Right, because it causes this animosity between teams, because the developers, who are probably the team that documentation interacts with the most, are annoyed because you're asking them questions, and you're asking them stupid questions by design, right?
And what you're trying to do is advocate for your customer. You're trying to put yourself in the end user's shoes and think of the questions that they might ask. But I could see that the developers might perceive that as you challenging their skill set.
Yes.
Okay.
And annoying them with questions that they think should be so obvious. And so you get this animosity between this group of people that's supposed to be answering your questions. They're the experts, and so you sort of start to hate them back, right? Like, it's hard not to. I think the MBA actually changed a lot about my mindset because I couldn't appreciate the benefit that sales was bringing to the table. It seems so obvious now. Of course, you can't have a business without sales. I mean, that's the first part that you have to have. But from my lowly position as a tech writer on the documentation team, it just looked to me like they were just jerks, right? Just people that were just dumping on you and
over-promising.
Didn't have any respect for you and didn't value your contribution. It's another problem. I mean, so you've got a kind of a perfect storm around technical communication. You've got documentation writers who annoy you, who ask you stupid questions that seem to challenge your intelligence or your competence, and you've got people who are doing writing. And writing is something that everyone does in their job. Everybody writes emails, everybody writes text messages, everybody writes everything at work, and so they all think they can write. And it is really hard, to not to make people understand the difference between typing and writing.
Yes, writing for your customer to be able to interpret, understand, and act.
Yes.
Versus, and that I had a episode that I just recorded about communication, and at the end of that episode, the person had said that no successful change has ever occurred without effective communication, and so many people think they're effective communicators. However, they aren't looking at their customers' preferred communication methods or channels. And in the world we live in today, we're very diverse. And in most organizations, there's 5 generations that are within that workplace. And for one communication to be sent through email and satisfy everyone's communications need is absurd. Those people who want to be effective communicators need to take your position of, to first communicate well, I need to understand who I'm communicating to, not just what I want to communicate, but how it needs to be communicated. And don't just produce it and send it out, but to send it and look for the feedback that validates that it was understood by the person who received it. And oftentimes that circle's not completed. So, and I think in most organizations, that's still very true, is that an idea was created by someone somewhere within the organization, a team executed that idea, threw it over the fence to the organization with this expectation of it was just such a great idea, everyone's going to naturally act on it. That's not reality. You need translators to help take the idea and convert it from maybe a technical explanation to a practical explanation. Okay, so I'm totally nerding out right here with you, and I feel like I'm hanging okay. So how did this become a passion of yours? Like, what events occurred within your career that said, like, that's that one thing that I want to dig really deep on and I want to specialize on because of this? Yeah,
well, the documentation world started to change. And the book publishing methodology, it just couldn't last. At the same time that technology was coming up to allow us to communicate directly with users, whether that's internal users, because a lot of the content that documentation team writes is used internally. Like you said, by customer support, for example, that's a great example. But also to end users. as technology was coming up to allow us to use those instead of printing books, which is a very time-consuming, very, very expensive process.
Yes, I imagine it is.
Yeah. At the same time, the technology around creating software, the philosophy around creating software, let's say, was changing. Mm-hmm. So the idea of agile software development, where instead of creating a monolithic piece of software and then sending it through the rest of the process, you have a living piece of software. And that's when we start to talk about software as a service. The difference, I don't even know, you might be too young to remember. Do you remember back when you used to go to an actual store and buy CDs of software and bring them home and install it on your computer?
Yes.
It used to be you bought a license, right? And you bought an actual physical piece of media.
I remember buying a floppy disk.
Right. You had to... Well, you remember more than I would have expected. So you had to make sure you had space on your machine, and you had to have minimum requirements and bandwidth and things. Now, much of the software that you use, probably even most of it, you go to a website and you log into it.
Yes.
And so by logging into it, there's benefits. There's benefits and there's drawbacks, right? There's benefits to the consumer and there's drawbacks to the consumer. There's a benefit in that you're always on the latest edition, right? You always have the latest and greatest software because they can just keep deploying it. The drawback is that even though you bought it once, you might not have it forever. So if you don't keep paying your subscription fees, then you'll lose access to that software. And businesses love that. Customers maybe somewhat less. Yes, because
but the
depends on how you look at it.
That platform is cloud based, so
right.
There are benefits for the end user. Is that the updates are occurring,
right?
And so whether it's a piece of software you use personally as an individual or as an enterprise solution.
Yep.
You're able to transition the makeup of your organization in a way that everyone's value producing. So you're not having to in-house experts on technology A, B, but that same person doesn't understand C. So I need another person for C. So your technical team can be more adaptive and supportive of the end user, because they have a group of people that are backing them up that are supporting these cloud-based solutions.
Yeah.
So, I've seen some organizations, maybe an HR team, for example, had a variety of people that were of a technical background supporting the HR tools. And in most organizations, the HR solutions are like a cross-patch quilt where it's like 4 or 5 different technologies, one that does payroll or one that does benefits or one that does time tracking.
Right.
So they're not integrated and they're individual pieces of software. Therefore, there's oftentimes an individual who can only support that one solution. And now with software as a service, is these solutions are better integrated. So they exist now on one platform, and that one platform is supported by an offsite group of experts that now you don't have to in-house yourself, which will allow you to take your in-house people and apply them in different ways. So that whole journey, yes, I know that the transition to apply and implement these technologies can be cumbersome, but the adaptiveness and the speed that you'll get as an organization oftentimes is worth it, and maximizing your resources is worth it as well.
Plus, you probably don't have a choice, because every software company worth its salt wants to go to a software as a service model. I mean, it's not only a lot more cost effective. It brings in recurring revenue, which is a lot more stable, a lot better for your ultimate survival as a business. But you can imagine the nonsense of trying to have a software as a service product that came with an encyclopedia of printed manuals. It doesn't make any sense. So around that time, we started having to adapt within the field as well. And so this was a very difficult, a painful transition for your documentation teams, which went from being a very insulated, very high level of expertise on publishing software. Publishing software was no longer necessary. It was just you no longer needed it at all. And a very interesting dynamic was that interesting and sad for a lot of people is technical communication started being something that was outsourced substantially. and the professional society for people in my field would used to, in this time period, near the beginning of this time period, started publishing a lot of like how to avoid being outsourced. India is the enemy, because India was the big place to send your outsourcing to at the time. A lot of there was a lot of us versus them against the outsourcers, and then all of a sudden, a group of technical writers, a big group of technical writers in India wanted to make a chapter, and suddenly they realized, like, oh, now we're representing them as well. This isn't an us versus them. There's only us. And it's true. I mean, it's exactly the case. So when I got the opportunity, at that company where they were making books, I was actually very lucky, because I wasn't one of the people creating books. They were very much on the forefront of this, and they were trying to implement an XML solution. And XML has been the basis of good modularized, structured authoring, and for software companies. Modularized meaning that instead of having a continuous book where you have to read from page 1 to page 150, there's little smaller pieces that can be put together in interesting ways. You take and each piece is self-contained, so that's modularized.
It can stand alone.
Very similar concept is used in development, software development.
Okay.
And then structured, meaning that every piece of content is predictable. So I think that this is another one of those kind of things that people outside of technical writing might not understand. When you're writing something as a non-technical writer, you might want to study the subject matter and give it a very special treatment. And you say, this part is the most important. I want to organize it like this. When you get into technical writing, what you actually want to do is exactly the same thing every time. You want to have the first part tell you, for example, your structure might be, the first part is a definition that tells you what this feature is. The second sentence is a sentence that tells you what the benefits of using it are. The third sentence is about when and where it's appropriate to use it. You might have a section in there about prerequisites, what you have to do first, what you have to already have in your system. You might have a section that's about how to. Each one of those might be modular, or the whole document might be modular. It might stand on its own.
Yep.
But whatever it is, it's consistent across all of your products. And having structure to your content feels scary at first when you're used to writing like a writer, like a fiction writer. The idea of structuring your content feels like a cage. It feels like a prison that you're stuck doing it exactly the same way. It feels
or
really
like
boring.
cookbook. There's a recipe I have to follow. There's a formula I have to apply, and I can see how. And not just to take what you're saying from your technical world, there are people within their work every day that have been valued for their ability to like innovate and apply custom solutions. In some ways now organizations are realizing that that's not sustainable, is that we can't have everyone doing it their own way. We have to standardize, and when you're asked that word standardize, which is what you were saying in some ways, is we have a standardized method for documenting now. So when I work in improvement, I ask people how could we standardize this? I know that there's going to be resistance because you're asking people to step into a format that they may perceive to be confining, but the reality is that if everyone did it that way, we're more able to analyze the impact and make better decisions about the best way. So if everyone does it the same way, then we're in a position where we can make a decision about what's the best way.
Yes, and what you find, you do need innovators still.
Yes.
You need innovators, and you need people who can take and apply those innovations in a enterprise-wide kind of way, so that you can gain the benefits from the things that work at scale. And that's maybe more the angle that I take on it. I think
maybe what I heard there is we need someone to develop and we need someone to deploy. And developing and deploying are two separate things.
Sometimes, yeah. There are some people that just can't follow a standard, right? There are some people who are brilliant and they are innovators by nature, and they just cannot stand to use the same thing that has been being used for the last 6 months, and they've got to get on to the next thing. And you want a few of those people. It's not to say that that's a bad thing, but it doesn't scale. In order to get the benefits from that at scale, you have to have somebody else who can come in and say, I see the value of what you've found here, what you've put together. Now here's how we get it out to everyone. Yes. And we take large scale advantage of that.
Yep. So that
So-
we're not having pockets of excellence in certain areas of an
Yeah.
organization, but we're taking that idea and we're replicating it in like areas so that those customers that rely on that part of your organization are getting that value as well.
Yeah.
So that, your customers aren't getting different experiences just because they happen to be interacting with
Yeah,
one of the
right.
innovators, but that innovation now is available to all customers because it's been deployed and it's being practiced
Right.
at scale, and it's someone behind the scenes translated it from the idea into everyday procedure or process that now all operators know how to perform.
Right. Right. And one of the benefits of XML as the technology that we use for technical communication is that is so very extensible. That's what X stands for in XML. It's extensible. It's very flexible. You can change it to do a lot of different things. So when those innovations come up and somebody has a better idea, the content is already ready because it's already in this very digestible, very vanilla kind of wet form that you can then plug into different ways of looking or different ways of transmitting, different ways of consuming. So when then I went to ExactTarget, and they're a software as a service company. We started, one of those innovators that just couldn't keep his hands off the latest thing, got this idea to start a wiki, and he wanted to create a wiki for inside the company where he, as a product manager, could just dump out all the information he knew about the product because it was, he was the person who was creating requirements. He was the one who was helping to design the product. So that people would stop asking him so many questions. He was spending far too much of his time answering people's questions. He wanted to be able to send them to a place and have them look at it. Well, of course, that became quickly a source for me as writing user guides. And then it didn't take very long before I said, why am I copying this out of this wiki and pasting it into a Word document to create a PDF? Why don't we just publish the wiki?
Yeah.
And it's a very important philosophy change, right? Because when you create a PDF, you create a Word document, a PDF, you have a moment when it's published. You say, I've worked on this, so this is a version, I've put a version number on it, and I put it on the website, and it's done.
It's very static.
It's very static at that point. It's dead. It's dead content. It's
Okay.
also really risky because once you have a dead PDF floating around, one person finds it, they save it to their desktop, they email it to someone else. A new version has come out in the meantime.
So you can't
They're still
track.
holding on to the old one.
Yeah.
Another person has downloaded a different version of it. These things conflict with each other, and it's a big problem in companies when you have conflicting messages going out to users.
What you're saying is like totally hitting home with some of the challenges I've seen within the organizations I'm supporting. And one of the things that you're saying here is that you can change the process and create assets that communicate what that new process is. But if you don't know where the assets that trained on the old way, if you don't know where those things are, you're at risk of someone finding them and applying them.
Yep.
And it really becomes a challenge in a workforce in which you are hiring and retiring a lot. So specifically
true.
taking and looking at nursing, the nursing workforce is going through a shift. Many of the baby boomers and those people who have been doing it for years are entering into retirement, and they're being replaced with a new generation of workforce. So organizations, to continue to deliver high quality care, so most of my background's in healthcare, are bringing in new nurses, and they're orienting them, and sometimes in that orientation, unknowingly, they're using these old documents that are expired, and they're teaching them on the old process, and as a result of that, the organizations are sliding back a little bit. So what you're talking about is this idea of living content is a way to potentially eliminate that gap and to reduce the risk of people training on or applying an expired document to deliver a service.
Right.
And you want them to be well equipped to always know what is the current way of doing it, which oftentimes is also the current best way we know how to do it.
Right.
And if people aren't, supported in that way, they're very resourceful. In their work, they want to do good work, and they're going to figure it out.
Yep.
We want to help them figure it out in a way that's turnkey so that they're doing it the way that it ought to be done. So what you're talking about here doesn't just live in the worlds of technology. I see it lives in healthcare. It lives in manufacturing or any work environment where the processes you deploy are growing and maturing and changing to get better and better and better.
See,
if you want to do
that's what
that.
I was hoping for. I was hoping that this little examination of something very specific would apply.
Yes,
to
and I
a
hope
larger
that the
scale.
people listening in are like, holy smokes, we do that. We need to adopt this mindset of living content.
But the thing is, Tommy, it's really emotional. It's surprisingly emotional. You wouldn't think, it doesn't sound like it when I talk about it, but when you're coming from a world where at the end of the day you had an encyclopedia, a set of encyclopedias on your shelves, and you could point to it and said, I did that.
It's
there's
it's
a page
finite.
count.
It's finite.
And-
We have completed the production of that book.
And you'd go have a party, and you'd celebrate, and you'd get your name mentioned at the company meeting or something. It was a moment of accomplishment, and it was very stressful for me and for everyone when we went to this wiki methodology. It's not only stressful because you don't have that sense of accomplishment, because all of your documents are out there living all the time.
Yes.
Not only that, we opened them up to be available for anyone to edit. Not customers, but anyone internally could go in and edit. We used
So
technology.
you relinquished ownership of it as well. So you've changed what success looks like. So in your paradigm shift, success was producing a tangible asset that existed in the form of a big binder, and that was project is done.
Well, and remember that there was that high learning curve, and that high territorialness. That was if you need something changed, tell me and I'll do it. We didn't give up ownership of it. We gave up control of it. So we had at ExactTarget, we had a technology-driven publishing process where internally there was a version, that was the draft version, that anyone in the company was welcome to go into. Now, surprisingly, most people did not want to go into and edit themselves. They would just tell us.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of fear around that when people say, well, what if somebody just goes in and messes everything up?
Right.
Well,
But
why
that
would
community,
they do that? Right?
yeah.
Nobody
Why would
wants
they do
to
something detrimental to?
Plus, the technology has version history, so then we would just roll it back. It wouldn't be a big deal.
Isn't it funny how we oftentimes perceive risk to be bigger than it actually is?
So much. People think that there's going to be so much risk involved in the idea of collaborative authoring is what this is called, collaborative authoring. And so, you'd put together a draft. You could send it directly off to a person who's an expert. Say, read it. If you want to, you can just open it up and make changes. And then because of the technology, I can go and see what changes you made. I can fix them up for writing things, for the things that have to do with grammar and punctuation. That's copy editing, or writing things like you've written it in a way people won't understand. I can fix that stuff up. And then we would go through a publishing process to make it available. There was never a time when it was done, and you lost a metric, right? There was a metric as a writer that you could say, in this quarter I wrote 550 pages worth of content. You lose that when maybe you edited the same document 6 times. At the end of it, maybe it's shorter than it was when you started. Maybe you ended up retiring documents, and your work was actually to make things smaller. Part of the irony of technical communication is that you're always trying to put yourself out of a job.
Yes.
You want to make software and user experiences that are so easy and intuitive that people don't need to go and learn as much about
That's
it.
such an amazing mindset to highlight here. So where you were, and I've recently read the book, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've read it, but read it. It's saying some of the same things you have said.
Sure.
So in his book, he talks about there's a finite game and an infinite game. And in a finite game, the goal is to achieve an objective, which oftentimes is short term. And as you do that, so short term was create a manual, produce it, it's done. That's a metric we can increment and say we've achieved our goal.
Right.
However, in an infinite game, the goal is to perpetuate this game and allow it to get better and better and better, and to position it so that it can be continued and inviting to the point where other people can participate, and that the goal is to keep the game going.
Right.
So in some ways, what you're talking about is in your career, your team, your technical writers went from playing finite games to this infinite game.
Right.
Is that we want to do this so well and make it so readily available that it is turnkey to the point where technical writers aren't necessarily owning it, but overseeing it to make sure that it's integral and that it's of good integrity, but that it's ongoing and it's always getting better, so that the customers who depend on these things are better served. Instead of, I'm going to dig my heels in, I want to be the only person that can do this stuff.
Right.
And if you did that, all those customers who depended on all this information would have got less and less and less. But because you gave up ground and created an environment where everyone can get involved, now you're giving customers more and more
Right.
and more.
Yes, and the feedback from customers, the constant incorporation of feedback from internal and external customers is a really relevant part of this. Back in the days of the books, you'd print the book and it would come with a comment card in the back that a person could rip out along the perforation and scribble something down on it and send it into. And I don't know if this is natural to everyone, but it deserves expressing. You didn't want to know. You didn't want to know. A person, you put it out there and it was sort of like, I don't want to know what you think of it.
Yes.
But we had to really we had to really change that. You have to really internalize the desire to find out what people think of what you're creating, because it's a cycle. It's you can only make it better if you know what's wrong. And I would compare it to like a person telling you that your zipper was open. It's
Yes.
like, you don't want to know, you didn't want to hear that information, but isn't it better to know? You want to
Yes.
know.
Yes.
So that you can fix it and
You can
look better
remedy
to
the
next people.
situation.
And with the wiki, not only were we able to do collaborative authoring and keep high standards on the content, but we also made it highly personal. We put a picture of the author at the bottom of every one and inviting feedback, and we would get a lot of feedback. We would get a lot of feedback, and as the document matured, it wouldn't be about the technical accuracy of the document. People might ask for help for support requests, and we could forward them to support. We could start working tightly with support, and maybe we could take that information and then feed it back into product management, who could incorporate it into the creation of the product.
Yes.
Because somebody found this confusing, and we know that because it came through our feedback form, and now we can cycle that into that. And we've became very tight. We started working very tightly with customer support and making sure that every single question that they had in their knowledge base was reflected in our wiki, so that they could always link to the wiki.
Yes.
And we worked tightly with product management. We worked tightly with development. We worked tightly with QA. We worked tightly with security. We started integrating ourselves and being a service to everyone in the company. So even though we were technically still a cost center, however, at one point we were working on creating a self-upgrade, like the ability to self-service upgrades through the documentation. And I was like, am I going to get a bonus when people sign up for more money because they read about the documentation, they read about a feature in the documentation, they said, I want that, auto provision it for me. I'm like, I was the salesperson, right? I'm the one who wrote the document. But they just laughed at me when I said that.
Yes.
So not only, but we were able to get really, really tight. And just think of what a difference that was from the beginning when we were a walled garden, right?
Yeah.
We were territorial. We were trying to keep everyone out. And the irony of this, all that walled garden, all of that stubborn insistence that we're important, stubborn insistence that we are essential to the product, going the opposite way is what kept us from being outsourced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being connected to the company is what made it difficult to take away our function. And being tightly integrated and being transparent, opening up the tools and saying, you can do it. Go ahead, go in there. We would love for you to go in there and make changes. We will work with you on this. Don't worry, customers won't see it until we've looked it over.
Right.
Go for it.
Yep.
And in so doing, the opposite of what was intuitive to us 20 years ago, which was to say, no, we're the experts in this. No one else can touch it.
Right.
Is what in fact made it so.
In some
essential.
ways, your story, if I can try to translate it, so one of the big pushes we're seeing now is big data, and you have business analysts, architects, highly trained technical experts that are helping organizations to take data and convert it into information and information into action. However, in some scenarios, that team is young and maturing and doesn't quite understand the value of what you just said, is that if we could make this accessible to the appropriate parties and be their support and their encourager, that we will create this environment where people have access to the tools they need to do their jobs well. And as they try to do their jobs, if they learn something, they're going to tell us, and we can capture that learning and we can share that learning and disseminate it in a way that informs how we sell or how we serve. So
Yeah.
you created a system of learning and getting better, and
Yeah.
that's most organizations have failed to achieve that, which is to become a learning organization.
Right.
And I think right now the next evolution of what you were talking about could be around this idea of big data and making it accessible to the operators so that they can actually apply it, and they don't have to send an email and ask for this report and get this report and not know what it says and have to write that same person and ask for a translation. So, one of the questions I ask in these podcasts is, how does this passion of yours intersect with improvement? And just hearing all of your examples, I'm pulling away things like this could apply to big data.
Right.
This can apply to training and orienting new workforce members to make sure that that person coming into your organization has the most current resources to do their job. And in orienting them, they're invited to give feedback on the efficacy of that document so that that document can then be improved to help the next person who gets oriented in the wake of that one person. And this creates succession. So it's this organizational rhythm that can occur by sharing information and ever evolving your information to get better and better and better, and to have someone, a gatekeeper, to actually facilitate that to happen. So that was that's where my mind went with your
Right.
stories. But I want to ask that question of you. What other examples or other ideas do you have how living content and collaborative authoring can be used to improve?
Yeah. Well, the progression for me was gradual, of course, right? I started off with a foot in the analog world and ended up in this digital place. But what really put a point on it for me was when I went off on my own and I started working with other clients and realizing that they are still coming into it with this project mindset, with this finite mindset, right? We're going to get a website out. Our project is a website. We're going to get a website published, then the website is published.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, right? I mean, that's not how the living document works, and a website does need to be a living document.
Mm-hmm.
So how the job isn't done when you have, you've drafted your content and you've created your design and you've created a publication schedule and you've got reviews in place and there's some drop dead date when you hit the button and it's live. But that's not when the job is done, because the job is never done. Mm-hmm. This is an infinite project, like you're talking about, and so you have to change your mindset about it. It's intimidating because it already feels like a big job. Mm-hmm. Writing the content and doing the design and implementing all that already feels like a big job. And now you're telling me I have to then also plan processes for how it's going to stay fresh, how it's going to stay alive forever. Mm-hmm. Well, yes. I mean, and the benefit of things like XML and structured writing is that it simplifies the actual creation of the content and it makes things more predictable in that way. Predictability in business is excellent. You've got some disruptors, you've got some new products, but for the most part, you want things to be predictable. Mm-hmm. You have to be careful where unpredictability is applied. So then having those tools to make things more predictable frees you up then to think about the processes that are going to keep those things alive. And in my world, hooking into existing processes that are already working, mm-hmm. is a very key way to go about it. So when I go into a client and they say, okay, well, we want you to create a user manual. Okay, I can create a user manual, but once that manual is published, it immediately starts dying. Right? We have to have a process to keep this alive. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to keep it alive? What's your process around development? Can we? You're probably using some sort of tool. Maybe you're using Jira. You're using some sort of ticketing tool to say this change is coming into the product. Can we hook into that process to say once something is released, then I get a notification about it, and then I know to go and update the document about mm-hmm. it. I mean, it can be very simple, but just the mindset of knowing to look for processes that are already working in your business. creating a new process is always risky
Yes,
because
yeah.
it's hard for people to get used to them. But looking for ones that are already working and then just hooking into them technologically if you can, because computers never forget. Right? If you can make an automated notification in your ticketing system that says, as soon as this ticket goes to production status, send an email to Amanda, then it's going to automatically happen, and I'm going to get it, and I know that it's really important. So I go in and read about it. I ask questions. I update the documentation, and then we have something that's already working.
And I think that is, in some organizations, being called a high reliability organization, an HRO. It is knowing your processes and equipping your operators to perform those processes, and expecting that if they are following that process, you're going to get a reliable outcome. And aside, so you use the word predictability, and that is a good thing for organizations to try to achieve. I think those are predictable and reliable are in some ways the same exact thing. It's
Right.
I go and I interact with a organization, and I have a certain expectation, and the more able that organization is to meet that expectation creates loyalty. And so if I travel and I go a certain place, I have an expectation that place is going to be just like the other place in Indiana, because their processes should be the same. So for most organizations, their processes are a great asset to give that predictable outcome or that reliable outcome. And what you're saying is, yes, let's create that environment where reliability is occurring, and it becomes easier to give those reliable results over and over and over again. And the effort and energy needed to give those results becomes less and less and less. So then we're getting extra organizational capacity because the operators now have easier processes.
Right.
And as they perform those processes, the results are more reliable. Therefore, they're not doing so much rework or service recovery or feeling frustration to resolve any burden. They have time back in their day, and that time back in that day is what an organization can use to charter new territory or grow their business or innovate or volunteer in your local community. There's so many great things an organization can do by working smarter instead of harder. And in the story you just shared, what you're saying is the only way to work smarter is to facilitate information sharing in your organization to get better and better and better, and to not have someone keep that information under lock and key and put walls around it and protect and defend it, but to create a accessible channel to that information where people can use it, apply it, and provide feedback on it. So everything you were saying just spoke to my inner nerd too.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a surprisingly emotional change, I think, and that's, you're already there, right? You've already taken those risks. You're already there, but some of your listeners might be out there hearing more processes. No, I'm not interested in more processes. That's boring. That's not innovation, or that sounds risky, or it sounds like it's going to just fill my day with boring drudgery. It's not really the case. These kinds of processes, they feel risky at first. They feel different, but they do. They free up your time. They take things off of your plate. And my that first company I was talking about that I worked for that created the paper manuals, and they're very strict about their writer to developer ratio. They were like, well, that's the industry standard says we have to have one writer for every 12 developers, and they would just demand and be a real pain in the neck to
stay within that
to
budget,
make sure that they kept their ratio up. But when I worked at ExactTarget, then we were a lean team of 5, and we were keeping up with hundreds of developers, and we were taking on additional tasks. By the end, we were contributing to the design of the UI. We were reviewing the UI, and we were contributing to that. So, and that became basically like 75% of our job. So a tiny lean team in just a quarter of their time was keeping up with hundreds of developers, thanks to this sort of thing, thanks to these processes, thanks to this repeatability, predictability, and constant feedback, the constant improvement that we were doing. And it was a mindset that feels scary at first, but it's freeing. It's freeing when you get there.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think as you partner with organizations, oftentimes they're probably coming to you with a deliverable in mind, And I think with your expertise, you're helping them understand that we can't just be deliverables based or project oriented. We have to be of a certain mindset that these things all add up to each other, and let me help you create that ecosystem within your
Exactly.
organization where you can become better and better and better. Let's not just do this one thing and wipe our hands and be like, okay, that was great, I had a lot of fun, I'll see you never. It's now that we've done that, how do we continue this and implement a continuous improvement
Right.
mindset where organizations go from being good to better to better and better and better. So I think everything you're saying
Yeah.
is appropriate to organizations in their journey, but it's also appropriate to people in their own journey to realize that if you want more from your career, find ways to make yourself less important in it and give your ideas freely, and that will make you extremely valuable.
Unintuitively enough, that's exactly the case.
Great. So I've loved this conversation, and I know in the
Thanks.
kickoff I had left or introduced a way to get a hold of you, but I still want to close with that if you're listening to this and everything spoke to you, or if you're curious about it and like, I don't quite understand it, but I think I need to be doing it, the best way to get a hold of Amanda is to find her through her website, which is www.crosswiseconsulting.com. Amanda, thank you so much for the conversation today. I've loved this conversation, and I think our audience is going to respond positively.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you so much. It's been a really fun time.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning into episode 6. I had a lot of fun nerding out with Amanda Cross. I learned a ton as our conversation started talking about technical writing. Had seen it quickly transitioned and focused on becoming a learning organization. Amanda is a role model for being a servant leader and acting in an open-minded way to which learning environments can begin to occur, and that everyone in sharing the information that they have in their heads does set the pace for an organization to get better and better and better and always learn and evolve. So real glad that she agreed to be on the episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.